Picture this. You're standing in the marble corridors of Nero's palace in 64 AD Rome. The air reeks of burning flesh and desperate screams echo through gilded halls. Before you, a trembling victim writhes as molten gold is slowly poured down their throat, their eyes bulging in unimaginable agony. The emperor watches with twisted delight, applauding each gurgled scream. But this horrific scene? It's just one of countless torments devised by history's most sadistic ruler. What I'm about to reveal about the 9 most savage punishment practices of Emperor Nero will shatter everything you thought you knew about Roman civilization. If you're ready to descend into the darkest depths of human cruelty, hit that like button right now. I guarantee you've never heard these blood-chilling stories before, and stay until the end. I want to know which punishment you think was most diabolical. Your comments always amaze me, so don't hold back your thoughts. Emperor Nero, when you hear that name, what images flash through your mind? Perhaps the mad emperor fiddling while Rome burned, a theatrical ruler obsessed with artistic performances. But behind this facade of eccentric leadership lurked a monster whose creativity in human suffering remains unmatched in recorded history. For anyone who crossed Nero, senators who questioned his policies, Christians who refused to worship him as divine, or simply citizens unlucky enough to catch his attention on a bad day, Imperial Rome became a living hell where death was not the worst fate imaginable, but rather a merciful escape from unthinkable torment. These weren't random acts of rage by an unstable mind. No, these were carefully orchestrated spectacles of suffering, meticulously planned punishments designed to demonstrate absolute power and strike terror into the hearts of millions across the empire. Under Nero's reign, Roman law became a weapon of terror. Citizens discovered that their rights, their dignity, their very lives could be stripped away on the emperor's whim. But Nero's genius for cruelty went far beyond simple execution. He understood that fear was the ultimate tool of control, and fear required imagination. His palace became a laboratory of human suffering, where new methods of torture were tested and perfected. Teams of engineers designed specialized instruments. Physicians studied anatomy to maximize pain while prolonging consciousness. Artists created elaborate theatrical settings to turn human agony into entertainment. Can you imagine living under such constant paralyzing dread, where a single glance, a careless word, or simply existing could trigger the emperor's wrath? Let me guide you through the 9 most horrifying punishment practices that Nero inflicted upon his victims. I warn you, each method reveals new depths of human evil, and by the end, you'll understand why some historians consider Nero the most terrifying ruler who ever lived. This wasn't merely execution, it was the complete destruction of human dignity through precious metals. Victims were forced to kneel while molten gold, silver, or bronze was slowly poured down their throats. The superheated metal seared through mouth, esophagus, and internal organs, cooking them from the inside out. Nero positioned mirrors around execution chambers so victims could watch their own faces contort in agony. The process was deliberately prolonged. Metals were heated to specific temperatures to ensure maximum suffering while keeping victims conscious as long as possible. Some survived the initial pouring only to die slowly over days as their burned organs shut down one by one. Nero's most infamous innovation turned human beings into living torches for his garden parties. Victims were covered in pitch, tar, and flammable oils, then ignited while still alive and conscious. But this wasn't quick immolation. The fires were carefully controlled to burn slowly from feet upward. These human torches were strategically positioned throughout palace gardens, providing flickering light for Nero's evening entertainments. Guests dined and socialized while surrounded by burning people whose screams provided macabre background music. Some victims remained conscious and screaming for over an hour as flames consumed their bodies inch by agonizing inch. Nero transformed traditional gladiatorial games into orchestrated scenes of human-animal horror. Victims weren't simply thrown to lions. They were sewn into animal skins and released into arenas with starving predators trained to attack specific body parts first. Women were often dressed as mythological characters and forced to reenact stories where characters were devoured by monsters. The animals were deliberately starved for days to increase their savagery. Nero commissioned special viewing boxes positioned for optimal sightlines to victims' faces, wanting to see every expression of terror and pain. Standard crucifixion wasn't creative enough for Nero. He developed dozens of variations: upside-down crucifixion, where blood pooled in the brain causing excruciating pressure; crucifixion on X-shaped crosses that dislocated multiple joints simultaneously; and crucifixion with additional torture elements like hot coals placed beneath victims' feet. Some victims were crucified with their eyes sewn open and forced to stare directly into the sun until blindness set in. Others had limbs broken before crucifixion to increase suffering. Nero often hosted banquets in crucifixion gardens, dining while surrounded by hundreds of dying victims. Nero's executioners perfected the art of removing human skin while keeping victims alive and conscious. Using specialized curved knives, they peeled skin in long strips, starting from extremities and working toward vital organs. The process could take days if done skillfully. Victims were kept in salt water between sessions to prevent infection and maintain consciousness. Some had their removed skin displayed on frames around them like grotesque artwork. The psychological torment of seeing your own skin hanging beside you while still alive added mental anguish to physical agony. Nero designed special bronze vessels where victims were slowly boiled alive. The water temperature was carefully controlled to cook human flesh gradually without causing immediate death. Victims were lowered feet first into increasingly hot water, while spectators observed their skin changing color and texture. The process lasted hours as water temperature was raised degree by degree. Victims watched their own bodies cook while remaining fully conscious. Some were pulled out partially cooked, allowed to experience the agony of scalded flesh, then returned to the boiling water for final cooking. This punishment involved tying victims to large wooden wheels, then systematically breaking every bone in their bodies with iron clubs. The process began with fingers and toes, progressing through limbs to major bones, saving vital areas for last to maximize consciousness duration. Executioners were trained to break bones without severing major blood vessels, keeping victims alive through the entire ordeal. The breaking process could last an entire day, with strategic pauses to let victims fully experience each new fracture before continuing to the next bone. Nero perfected impalement techniques that kept victims alive for days, while wooden stakes slowly penetrated their bodies. Stakes were carefully shaped and positioned to miss vital organs initially, allowing for maximum suffering duration. Some victims were impaled through multiple non-vital body parts simultaneously, creating forests of suffering humans. Others experienced progressive impalement, where stakes were driven deeper each day until finally reaching fatal organs. Nero held contests among executioners to see who could keep victims conscious longest during impalement. Nero's ultimate expression of power was mass executions designed as elaborate theatrical performances. Hundreds of victims would be tortured simultaneously using various methods, while orchestras played music timed to their screams. These spectacles lasted for days, with victims experiencing different tortures in carefully choreographed sequences. Some were forced to torture each other as entertainment. Parents watched their children suffer before experiencing their own torments. Nero treated human suffering as artistic performance, rating executioners on creativity and victim reaction. What makes Nero's cruelty even more terrifying is how it became normalized entertainment for Roman society. Citizens attended these torture spectacles like modern people attend concerts. Children grew up watching human beings destroyed for amusement, creating a culture where extreme suffering was not only accepted but celebrated. The detailed records of these punishments, preserved in Roman histories and archaeological evidence, reveal a systematic approach to human suffering that treated torture as both science and art. Nero's legacy demonstrates how absolute power can transform human creativity into instruments of unimaginable evil. These 9 punishment practices represent the absolute pinnacle of human cruelty, implemented by an emperor who viewed suffering as entertainment and terror as statecraft. They force us to confront the darkest capabilities of human nature when unchecked power meets sadistic imagination. Studying Nero's reign reminds us that civilization is a fragile construct, that progress can be reversed, and that the capacity for evil exists within human societies, regardless of their achievements. The victims of these unnamed horrors, preserved in historical fragments, demand that we remember not just Rome's architectural marvels and military conquests, but the human cost of tyrannical power. Which punishment do you think was most diabolical? More importantly, what lessons can we draw from studying such historical atrocities to prevent similar horrors in our modern world? Share your thoughts below, because understanding humanity's darkest chapters might be our best defense against repeating them.